Some kids, like, they just can't get through it though. They don't understand, like, they just like cannot deal with it anymore. And that's why you get like the suicide rates and stuff going up, is because they can't see past that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then it's sad, and it happens in elementary schools too, where kids talk about wanting to kill themselves, how they have no friends, how they literally just want to die and stuff like that. And they're 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And you hear kids say stuff like this and they get really upset, and you're just, and you like, it just breaks my heart.
Yeah. Fuck, that's so shitty.
Yeah. And you can tell them all you want, like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. But it also gets annoying. People say that sometimes, like, but it's not okay right now.
Yeah.
And then like building those relationships with kids where they are able to tell you things. It does happen. And then obviously you can be there as much as you can, but you need them to be able to speak up about it and tell you. Like, I always tell kids I'm working with, I'm like, if you don't tell me what's going on, like, I can't help you. Like, if they're very, like, high school, especially if they're like super pissed and they're having a bad day, and teacher's like, oh, they're in a bad mood today. I'm like, well, I wonder, like, why? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, well, did you ask? Like, maybe something happened at home. Maybe they're going through something. Maybe there's something coming up that is just really making them anxious, but you haven't bothered to ask. And like, usually, like, people are pretty good. Like, they'll ask, but you do need to ask, because not a lot of kids will just come up and be like, hey, this is what happened. It's just not, I don't do that. No. It's not comfortable at all. Especially when I was in high school or elementary school. I was like, that's not happening.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Absolutely not.
For your initial contact with these kids, like, because if you're mostly working with like the special ed kids, for some of these other kids that are like going through stuff for reaching out and stuff, how do like you end up talking to them?
Yeah.
Like do they just come in and?
Well, in elementary school, like, I kind of just work in 1 or 2 classrooms. I work in like a kindergarten and a grade 3.
So you're in the entire class.
Yes, you're in the entire class. Yes, yeah. My students, they work in there. And then as for high school, it's the same thing. Like, you kind of just build relationships with the kids. Like, you're in the classrooms, right? They're pretty, like, Langley School District is pretty inclusive. Yeah. With those sorts of things, you want to be in the classrooms as much as possible anyways. But like, even if I'm working with one kid, I still can help other kids, like, do certain things. And eventually you kind of just start to build relationships with them, like, outside of like what they're doing for schoolwork. You're like, what'd you do on the weekend? Is there anything, like, I don't know, like, what you're interested in, you kind of like learn stuff about them. And then that's when you start to notice like different behaviors where it kind of makes you wonder, like, I wonder why they're sort of like that. And like, sometimes I find like younger kids are more willing to talk about, because they don't necessarily know that they shouldn't be saying certain things. Like
in elementary school.
Yeah. Like, if something's like going on at home, like, oh, like, mom and dad fight a lot or something, and they kind of say it like that. But in high school, they know better. They're just like, oh, well, this is going on because this and this. But kids are just like, oh, mom and dad are fighting.
Yeah.
But in high school, they're like, they kind of realize that it's a little bit more serious or something like that, right? So, or they start to notice like their parents drink a lot, or they start to notice that their parents aren't always around. They start to notice that they're like, their thoughts are processing more into depth, whereas little kids are just like, oh, like, they're not really there, or
they don't really know what it is.
Yeah, they don't know and they don't understand. But I definitely do think it shows up later. Like, when I was in elementary school, I would start to notice that I would notice like a lot of the stuff that my mom was doing. She was drinking a lot. Her parents would fight a lot. And I would start to notice like, oh, like, I've got pulled over by the cops. My mom would be drunk driving with me and my brother in the car multiple times. But the first couple of times, it didn't really make sense to me. Like, I didn't really understand what was going on until I got into grade 6 or 7. And my mom picked us up from a movie. And I had to get her to pull over on the side, do hundreds because she was wasted, and get all my friends out of the car and call my friends' parents to come get us. So, so just like stuff like that. And then I started to grow up really quick because I started to notice. And then high school was just like a whole other ball game. So I noticed that's when she started doing like harder drugs, drinking more. And I just knew what these things meant now, was before I didn't really. And I would say like it was a fight or flight situation at the time. But I had to do what I had to do at that time to sort of like get through until after I graduated to sort of move on. But now I notice that I'm older, like, it does come up and it affects me more in a negative way now than it did then, because I was just kind of like, I need to do this, this, and this. I'm going to school. I'm distract myself as much as possible. But now I notice like when things come up now, it makes me more upset than angry. Like, before, it would just make me mad. I'm like, whatever, I'll just do this. I'll deal with it later. But now I notice that I think about it more, but that just is what it is. Whereas opposed of maybe if I had like different outlets when I was younger, if I felt like I had more people I could talk to, it would have been a little bit different. Or if I learned that, like a lot of people knew because my mom was not like secretive about these things.
Yeah.
My friends knew what was going on, or people would see her.
Yeah.
And at school, they'd be like, oh, like I saw her doing whatever on the road. I'm like, sick. I'm like, why? Like, why? Like, your mom's at the park. I'm like, yeah, I know. Fucking tell me something I don't know. You know what I mean? And they would say it almost like in a bugging you kind of way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Shitty, but it is what it is. And I would say that a lot of I could tell you so many things that happened when I was younger, but I would say that a lot of my experiences then, maybe the person who I am now, and that like drives me a lot to like help kids that have mental health issues. Now, and I can use like my experiences as well to benefit theirs, and then maybe like deal with some of my stuff as I go on as well.
Yeah.
And then,
I think it's definitely helpful for both people. Like the more you work with kids and learn about them and stuff, you just continue to learn about yourself as well.
Yeah, exactly. And doing Choose Kindness kind of giving myself like something to pour my heart into. Like I've literally never loved something I've thought of more.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
You know what I mean? So that way I know like at least I'm trying to get support for these kids, whether it's like bringing it into the school and helping them like with their school actual academics or just like with their mental state. But like honestly, if a kid is really upset and their cortisol levels are just fucked, they're not learning anything at school anyway.
No.
Like that part of their brain is not receptive to they don't give a shit about a math equation or reading when their home life, like in the morning, like they didn't get breakfast. You know what I mean? Like you can't teach kids that are not ready to learn yet because of where their focus is.
Yeah. I noticed that for, even when I think about my past, I'm like, a lot of it's a blur and I don't remember a lot because I was always so scared and shit all the time. And like, when you're so caught up in your own head, you're missing everything that's going on. It's like you're just literally sitting there thinking about all your problems and shit and whatever happening.
Like sitting there almost like, I'm not like feeling sorry for yourself necessarily, but it's very hard to shake that feeling once that does kind of come up a little bit every now and again. Yeah. You like don't want to be in the public.
No.
You're like, absolutely not. No.
Yeah. And it just keeps building and it's not a good time.
No, it's not, especially with stuff like anxiety. And then it's like hard to pinpoint it sometimes of like what is going on. And cause you can't even tell people. Right. So,
yeah, I mean, I never knew what it was. Like when I was younger, I had anxiety from as long as I can remember. And I had similar situations with my mom. Like that's when my parents split up. She was an alcoholic as well for a long time. And I remember similar to you, I didn't really understand at first. I was kind of like, whatever, like, I don't really know what drinking is or what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. At the time, they're like, oh, like you don't like put two and two together necessarily. You don't see, and you don't realize that like their drinking is actually like life ruining.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. And then I just knew I never felt comfortable like being there, but I didn't really know why. It was kind of just like, okay, whatever. I don't like this. This is weird.
Yeah.
And then I remember one Christmas we were with my mom and we were going to a family dinner and my dad had dropped us off at her house and we were getting into the car and we were all in the car. Then she came out and she was like so hammered, she couldn't even get her key in the ignition. Yeah. And she was like laughing and her boyfriend at the time was like, you know, we were all kind of laughing at first. It was just like, whatever, she can't get it in. Like, that's funny. But then he was like, then he started getting mad. He's like, you're literally so drunk. You're going to drive with your kids in the back, all this shit. And then we were basically all crying and freaking out. And
screaming
I'm like,
for your lives.
Yeah, I'm like, fuck. Like,
because then for whatever reason, you probably realize like that is, and it's like something so small like that, but you're finally that is what's going on. And then you start to remember things from there on out because you realize that is what's that has been what's going on, but you just never heard it said like that before necessarily. Like, oh, like you're drunk driving with your kids. Yeah. When before you had never heard it like that. You're like, oh, like where you're driving, and in your head you're like, well, why? Of course she's driving. She's my mom. She gotta take us places. It's fucking just, drive me.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I was like, fuck. And then I remember I was like so fucking mad about it, and like we got there, he ended up driving, and then I got my dad to pick us up. But I remember he even kind of, you know, that was the first time that I really knew, and it really bothered me, and I was like so mad. Yeah. And my dad obviously knew, like that's why they kind of split up, or some of the reason. But you know, I would tell him like, yeah, like she was literally going to drive with us in the car, like all this shit. Like we could have died.
And you were able to explain the situation like for what it
Yeah.
was. It wasn't like sugar coated at that point anymore,
No.
I guess you could say.
Yeah.
It was like very real.